Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you guys being here. I hope you are safe and doing well wherever you happen to be. As I'm recording this, I'm coming very close to my my legal wedding ceremony. I'm not calling it my wedding because my actual wedding was supposed to occur in May. But if you've been paying attention to the news at any time in 2020, you might know why the original date did not happen. But we, my fiance and I, and some very near and dear are finding a way to make it work, and I'm very excited about it. So as I'm recording this, that is on the horizon, and that is my shining. My bit of shining optimism for the year that's been 2020, and it feels selfish to focus on the good, but for me that it translates focusing on those bits of good. To me, that translates into hope at a time when it's important to have some. So I hope that I want if you're listening, I know that there's something like that for you, and I want you to find it, whatever it might be. If it's a person, I know that you guys are smart and you want to hold that together. So be well is what I'm saying. My guest on the show today is comedian Jesse Jones. Jesse, I met during my time as a doorman at the Laughing Devil Comedy Club in Long Island City in Queens. Jesse, I would see him periodically at the Laughing Devil, and he has a very affable storyteller like quality to his comedy that I always really resonated with because he was one of the few comics from when I was very heavily like at that club and in the scene, so to speak. I feel slightly removed now, but he was one of the few guys that was doing what I would call very still very personal, but very friendly kind of long form storytelling. And he was always very nice to me at the club, which is another way I rate comics. Lots of comics you would you think of, oh, you just want to talk about if they're funny and what their jokes are. I also always a big part of how I view comedians is how did they treat me when I was a doorman, and and pretty much everyone was super nice, Jesse Jones being one of them. And Jesse's a very funny guy who I had not seen for a number of years after he moved to North Carolina, and I was curious to see how things have been for him since he moved, and also to talk about the days in New York. And there's some great stories here. He was in New York before the UCB Theater, which is now bankrupt, even had a physical space, the original location on 28th Street and 7th Avenue. So, or maybe it was 8th. It might have been 8th. So there's a lot of old comedy stories in this, and a lot of good comedian shop talk. And I'm looking forward to sharing this with you guys. If you enjoy this interview and feel like you know a friend who might be one to want to listen to this podcast, we are available on all of the major platforms: Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. You can of course also find me on Libsyn as well, awesomedisaster.libsyn.com, and there'll be a new website coming shortly where you can find all of your podcast and things related to me as well, if you are interested in anything else that I do. So thank you guys very much for being here, and let's go to my chat with comedian Jesse Jones. We're recording now. I don't know what stand-up looks like where you are right now, but I've seen some pretty fun shows in parking lots in the past couple of weeks, outside wearing a mask, which has been nice. I go like to one a week just to keep my brain right. But that's what it's been like up
Right.
here in New York.
It's been interesting. We've been in it this long, only to go full circle and be right back where we started, working outside with equipment that's not meant to be used outside.
That's kind of exactly how I feel. Like all of those, like I hit. This is my 10th year in New York City. All those years of like trying to do like three to four open mics a night. You know, like honing the craft, like trying to figure out how to get past it, like stand up New York, waiting late night at the comic strip, trying to figure out
Right.
like, oh, how do I get in at New York Comedy Club? And after
Doesn't matter
13
anymore.
and
They're gone.
after 13 years, I'm stand up New York. We're doing shows in parks and parking lots now. It's
It's a
oh,
beautiful thing. Some of the worst gigs that you can remember from the beginning, those are the ones that really taught you how to handle what's going on right now.
oh I
I remember. Do you what was the big hurricane? Uh,
Sandy.
the what Sandy? Yes, the one where like couples were made because they literally got caught inside with one another for weeks at a time. Probably a lot what's going to happen after this whole thing's over. Uh, we had to do a show right after Sandy, and it was outside in Brooklyn under a bridge, and all of their audio equipment had been damaged in the storm. So we had to yell over highway noise for a show of 50 people. And
Oh my
I
god.
can't help but think that that's got to be at least a parallel to what people are dealing with right now.
I imagine so. I think, and I don't know if this is. I can't confirm that this is happening, but I remember, like during Sandy, like the week after the storm had hit, and everything was kind of, uh, like trying to pick itself back up, but the city was still pretty much shut down. Like Kevin Frolix and I, when we lived together, like had people like walk for hours to get to our apartment, and we just set up like a mic in his in like our living area and did a show there. Like the same way musicians are like have been doing house shows forever. I imagine
Right.
like Flophouse on Vice. That wasn't just an interesting TV show. That was a precursor for the industry.
Well, I mean, it's like Jurassic Park. Find a way, you know. All of us have things that we have to get out of our head, and whether it's in a club or in a parking lot, we're probably going to scream it at someone, whether they want us to or if they paid to attend.
Yeah, totally. It has definitely when you take away all of the construct of stand up like lights, stage microphones, and all that, the differences between stark raving lunatics and comedians become very few and far.
Oh, very much so. The only, I mean, what are the differences right now? You're in a park. You're telling a punchline. Is a punchline the difference, or is the setup the difference?
Yeah, maybe it's the intent because I don't think it's the clothes. I feel like dress is kind of the same. But I remember, dude. I remember because like I remember and correct me if I'm wrong because I you to me my memories of you are you I would see you frequently at the Laughing Devil when I was a door
Hmm.
guy there trying to like because I thought one of my other ideas was okay I'll work the door at a club that'll be how I my foot
Right.
in and then so I would remember always seeing you come in you had that great bit about the zoo about like you and your
Oh
friend going
yeah,
to the zoo I always enjoyed that.
very true story.
Yeah, and
That
how?
was.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. We're so polite.
I know what I was gonna say is what I always liked uh about your comedy is kind of like the friendly everyman storytelling aspect of you on stage. That's the kind of stuff that and like absurd one liners are the kinds of comedy I really gravitate towards.
Yeah, the a lot of, and again, the beauty of New York was that it took all of us time to find our voices and what we were, what we felt comfortable saying. Uh, and for me, a lot of people didn't like that. Like, I thank you for saying that you did, because I know a lot of people were annoyed that I would be talking about, heaven forbid you talk about your kids in the New York comedy scene, or anything that wasn't my dick or I'm so smart and edgy. Like I
Sure.
you can, it just wasn't. I worked with what was happening in my life at the time, and that was what was happening in my life at the time. And if you
Yeah.
try to be something else, then you're not going to get more than 15 minutes out of that.
Yeah, I agree. And that was and we everyone was we were all just trying to figure out like our version of who we were. And then like the I guess I feel like maybe there is a certain generation and I probably thought more this way when I was like 22 or 21 before I even started stand up, where I kind of viewed any comic that talked as their kids as like, well, that's what people did in the 80s. And I'm like, yeah, but people have continued to have kids, and that's continued. People talk about that stuff that's relatable for a reason.
No, totally. And if I'd have been a something else, I would have talked about something else. I think it's all just in the wheelhouse of what you're going through. And that was always it was always like I felt like you had to work a little harder just because you weren't the edgy one-liner smoking on stage talking about the differences between anal beads and frickin' braces or whatever the hell. So
Mm-hmm.
you had to make sure that you had a little more oomph than somebody that might be relying on that, not shock value, but just that different perspective to get over.
Yeah, I agree. And those were always like, and this is why I liked, because I kind of saw myself in both worlds. Um, those like stuff like that in like material like that we're talking about, like we'd see at like open mics or at like the hip bar show or what have you. That stuff
Right.
would always tank when you got in front of a club. I remember like because I was at the Laughing Devil for like like maybe 2.5 years before the festival. I think one of the festivals broke me, and I and I couldn't do it and I
which
couldn't do it
which
anymore.
festival broke you?
Well, it was one of the Laughing Devil festivals because I was working it and I was a performer, so I had a
Uh,
couple
uh,
of satellite shows, and I think I remember not I remember doing a show that had no microphone like in the
oh,
venue, and I think my
I remember those satellite shows.
and I think I had a moment
Like
where I was
you,
just like I can't I can't.
right?
Just had like what a mini freak out, but yeah, like you have those like
Oh,
little
the
satellite
satellite
ones.
shows were so bad. I totally. What were they? You would be like in a. It wasn't a warehouse, but it was a warehouse. It was like on the fifth floor, on the way up to a comedy club. But
Well, the
you
one
weren't going to the comedy club. You were stopping at the fifth floor, where there was just like a little room carved out with chairs.
Yeah, and the one I'm talking about was at the what was then called the Bread Box Cafe, that coffee shop that had all the rolling pins on it in
And
Long Island City.
windows.
Yes, and windows in Long Island
Mm-hmm.
City. And um, I mean, I had tons of great experiences, but just that weekend was like I I paid $40 for that to do this. I
Right,
could have
right.
just walked in here and started doing this, but um,
Totally.
yeah, and the other thing I would say is because I was there for so long, like I would see like people that would like crush in like the alt rooms or do like or do some kind of like weird or like really in your face thing. But then when you like sometimes like you're at the stage where you forget that there's a you're an entertainer also, and and all that's super like edgy, defying the norm stuff would tank at real club at comedy clubs.
Well, and I think that's what you learn over time. Like, there's so many people that I absolutely loved to watch, but then you put them, and it's a frame of mind too. Some people do not want to do the room in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, or they don't want to do uh, Norfolk, Virginia. Like they
Mm-hmm.
want to do what they want to do. But if you were to take some of that, like what was the worst thing you can remember? Because we heard a lot. What was the grossest, like the worst thing that stands out in your mind of something you heard at an open mic or one of those alt shows?
Oh, one of the worst things. There are so many. Okay,
So many.
there and there's here's a pretty good hack joke that I heard a bunch. And I saw this in different states, like different variations on like oh like women aren't into anal sex and because they all sound like dolphins, like and like I've heard like three or four different versions of that. and that would always kind of make me
Totally.
roll my eyes.
Well, there's ways to do that. Like I do a thing with a dolphin where it has nothing to do with anal sex. It's talking. The whole thing revolves around how much smarter my wife is than I am.
Yeah.
So there's ways to grow those types of animal metaphors into something that doesn't involve the because that's basically what you probably heard that one 1,000 times, and then
Mm-hmm.
she swats her hand away.
Yeah.
Uh, but you do that in, I don't know, anywhere not Brooklyn or Astoria, and you're going to have a crowd either looking at you like, yeah, I remember college, sure, or they're going to be looking at you like, I don't. What are you going to? But what are we doing here? What's going on right now?
Uh huh. Um, I'm curious if any bits like that really stick out for you in your time as a comedian. If there's anything where you're just like, oh boy,
Oh,
yeah.
well, normally you can tell it, even if you missed the joke, if you had to follow the person, you could tell something bad had happened, either by the comedian blaming the crowd as soon as he got off stage, or the fact that you were having to reheat frozen dinner when you got up there. Like there's because you didn't have to hear the thing, but if you like, man, they are tight tonight, and you're like, oh no, what
Uh
did
huh.
you do?
Yeah.
Um, there were a lot of, Lord, we probably know the same people that told those jokes. The joke that would start with like, "So here's why I think aborted fetuses should be able to vote," or something like what?
Mm-hmm.
No, no. Well, you better have something to land this plane, man, because you just started with some frickin' scorched earth.
Yeah.
And they never
Exactly.
did. It was always just like some idea that they thought would be a good way to start something to get people's attention. But then after every butthole in the room puckers, you've got to kind of figure out where you're going from there. If you don't have anything, then shit, you got however many more minutes left to go of everybody wanting you to get down as quickly as possible.
Oh, 100%. And then and it's like, well, I'll start with this, and this will be an excellent setup for my nuanced take on the electoral college.
Right.
Oh,
Well, that's also, I feel like that's the first few years of doing stand up is learning that you're not going to be able to plan, or at least not at that stage. Like you can put a set list together, but do you remember like at the very beginning where your set
mm-hmm.
list was like, I'll do this thing and then I'll do this thing and that'll lead me to this thing and then that goes there. You thought you could force everything where it was supposed to go. You thought you could just like,
Mm-hmm.
here's the order I thought them in, so I'll put that on stage. And
Right.
then it takes, time. It takes a lot of time to figure out where the Rubik's cube sort of comes together and what actually leads into something else and how to do it organically and not make it feel like a forced fit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's like kind of like kind of like the way an album's put together. Like, certain songs sound better after other songs when you're putting together same way when you're putting together a set list for stand up. The other thing I will say, I became more conscious of uh I became more conscious about like the self-described like edgy stand-up comedians after I started like producing and hosting shows, because when you're producing a show, you're not just I turned into my mother. I turned into my mother hosting a dinner party, or my fiance hosting a dinner party. It's like I want to make sure everything's squared away. I want to make sure everything comes out at the right time, and then if someone just comes out and it is like, here's going to be my edgy rape joke. I'm like, oh Jesus fucking Christ! How many jokes
Right.
about Snackwells do I have to do in between before I can bring up the next comic? Is
Right, right. 100% true. It's the people that were legitimately edgy, they weren't edgy on stage. That's just who they are. They're
mm-hmm.
just interesting people with a unique perspective. You can't go into it thinking I'm going to be the edgy guy, because you're going to sound like either the angry guy or the asshole. You've got to be, I don't know. I always thought Dan St. Germain surfed that edge brilliantly,
Hmm.
but he wasn't trying to. He was just being himself. You know, like
Yeah,
there's a
yeah,
big
totally.
difference between trying to do it and that just being who you are. It's the same way that like I couldn't do that because I wasn't going through what he was going through. I was going through what I was going through, which was a staying at a club till 2 o'clock in the morning and then going home and taking a wife to the hospital so she could have a baby. You know, like it was just different worlds at that point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. When did you start comedy? Like, I kind of want to trace this a little bit. So we're talking about like the early days when you're like learning to put together a set list and what your experiences. I will also say, sorry to do the aside. The everyone that every comic I'd call they're edgy on stage, nicest person off stage. Like they don't feel
Oh,
like
totally.
they never view themselves as that. They just are kind of doing their thing, which goes to what you say is you're kind of living your truth at that moment when you're a comedian.
They've got the same insecurities that we all do. Like Mark Norman, freaking one of the best out there right now.
Uh huh.
Him and I, what was the name of the little spot that used to be off Delancey? We had
Um,
worked that room. It was set up almost like a 50s diner. I think there was even like a Cadillac, the back of a Cadillac in the back of the bar.
I know
But
the
but
one you're
just to
talking about. It was like a Mexican place, maybe.
something like that.
Uh
And you
huh.
walked through to the back, and there was like this hip little 50s vibe and a fun little room.
Uh huh.
But to your point, Norman, who is arguably one of the best working right now, he gets off stage and how'd that go? You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
he didn't. He just killed. He just absolutely slaughtered. But he got off, and he had the same humility that we all have when we get off. When it's like, okay, did I hear it right? I feel like it went well. I'm not sure if it went well. I think I could do something better. And that's what you need. That's what you're supposed to have. If you get off stage and go, "Yeah," well, you probably need to listen to the tape or watch the video because you'll find something if
Yeah.
you're really interested in getting better, you'll find something to hate about yourself before the set's
Yeah,
over.
totally. And that's how you improve, but that's also the painful part of the whole process. So
There is some humility, there is some humbling when it comes to watching back the tape where you're like, I knocked that one out of the park, and then you realize, no, I
nah.
the dismount was really good. Like I
Hmm.
definitely they were laughing when I got off stage, but that middle chunk, whoo.
Yeah, let me go back and tighten that up. So where did you start doing comedy? Like where do you come from, Jesse?
Oh man, I see I didn't get to stand up for a while. Uh I did sketch comedy in
Mm-hmm.
college in North Carolina. And we had some success. Like the head writer of our group, he got picked up by MTV2
Uh
and
huh.
had a series of shorts on MTV. And then we got flown out to no, we didn't get flown out, we flew ourselves out to write for a subsidiary of Paramount a couple TV shows. And then that fell through, and it was time to get out of like when like in the
Mm-hmm.
movie the underdog has that one chance, and then that
Yeah.
one chance is where they learn that we should do this thing, and it happens and the plot moves forward.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't happen. The thing that was supposed to happen didn't. So then we were all like, oh, so that's just not going to be a thing. And as soon as that happened, my wife, now my girlfriend at the time, she got transferred to New York. I'd always wanted to live in New York,
Uh
went
huh.
up with her. Believe it or not, zero sketch in New York when I got up there. Hammer Cats, that was it.
Oh
And that
wow.
was but pre up yeah, it was before Upright Citizens Brigade took over the world. It was probably a few years before Upright Citizens Brigade. They were probably I think they were around, but it wasn't like the one in two comics were probably taking classes there. It was
Right.
it was more like a show that had been funny on Comedy Central however long ago, and I think they're opening up an office in the Village. Like it wasn't like an established thing. So a
Yeah.
couple years of doing a variety of variety style shows with a production company called No T Productions, which still to this day, some of my best friends in the world come from that group. Then I got into Upright Citizens Brigade because it was like the writings on the wall once Poehler hit Saturday Night Live. I think that's the time frame too. I
Uh-huh.
think as soon as Amy Poehler hit Saturday Night Live, that's when everybody and their brother could trace it back to a starting point. And we're like, we need to go there. This is where the farm is. And
Yeah, yeah, totally. That
that
became the
was
path in the grass.
and that was also a super fun time to be at UCB because
I
if you
bet.
like when I was taking classes there, it was like Gethard was still teaching and Billy Merritt was teaching and
Uh-huh.
Jackie Leone and all of these amazing freaking minds of comedy and a wealth of knowledge to be in those classes, you know?
That's
It really
incredible.
was just, and they're the muscles. I've always thought that the improv muscle and the stand up muscle are two very different things, but you can use things from each muscle to complement the other.
Yeah,
And so
totally.
while you, and I think you see a lot of improv people struggle with that when they try stand up because inevitably they all will, and vice versa.
Yep.
They think you can go up there without a plan at all and be fine,
No, no,
and
you
you can
definitely
be
can't.
for like a minute. You get up there without anything, and it's going to just be a hey, oh god, they're not talking to me. Is that what it is? Like there's that deer in the headlights moment when they realize the crowd doesn't give, the crowd takes.
Yeah. Well, because cuz improv
Like the
is
soul vacuum that they're not used to.
yeah, exactly. It's like talking to especially stand-up audiences in New York. I feel like you're sort of like it's sort of like punching a wall with your jokes. Like there's not a lot of
Mm-hmm.
give and take. It's probably evolved somewhat as over the years, but New York, I always imagine like the crowd is like openly wants you to fail so that they can like eat you alive, and they're just like, all right, be funny, and then you go up there and you got to be like, I'm gonna be funny at you, motherfucker. Like I always maybe that's like the
You have to
comedy
attack the
seller,
crowd.
yeah, and maybe that's what I think the comedy seller is like. I don't think I'm completely correct, but I also don't think I'm completely wrong. So this is probably like okay. So this is maybe like what the mid '90s. So if Polar is on SNL, what is
Right.
this like
This
96, 97?
no, 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 no. My time frame might be off too. This was around 2005 or six that I was really doing Upright Citizens Brigade hard.
Uh huh.
So the masses may have found it, but it hadn't become a.
Cultural institution.
You didn't have kids hanging out there just to hang out there when I started.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Oh
Like
no,
I
that
got out
totally
of it.
does.
I got out of improv because it turned into like Dungeons and Dragons. You'd see kids sitting in the. It changed when they moved to the fancy studio office or whatever place they moved to, where it went from like the hidden, not hidden, the little cave
Yeah,
theater
it used to
next
be
to the
a
grocery
basement next to
store.
the grocery store. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And that place was like freaking magic because you felt like you were really in some dungeon rock and roll shit, you know?
Oh,
And then they
totally.
moved to the
42nd Street and like
pretty
10th Avenue.
bright, everything was white and bright, and so were the people taking classes there. And it was just everybody in the I remember we were trying, I just had a group disband and I was trying to put a new group together. And I'm if you make eye contact with me, I'm gonna talk to you. I don't have the ability not to.
Yeah.
And there was all these people there sitting. I was like, oh cool, everybody's in it. We're in it. Let's
Uh
do
huh.
it. Who wants to go? Who wants to? I'm starting a group. Who wants to do it? Well, we're not really, we're not here to do improv as much as we're here to learn improv. And I'm like, Dungeons and Dragons, gotcha.
Uh
You've
huh.
just gone from being a third level wizard to a fourth level
Mage.
improver.
Uh huh. No, I get what I get what you're putting out there. Lots of like, I don't want to study improv. I just want to like be around it. Like I'm hip to that.
Right.
So when you were taking when you're taking classes that early on, that's got to be that sounds like a super interesting time before it turns into this kind of like establishment, like back when like
Farm.
and yeah, like and then classes like sell out like the second that they're booked. What is one of the more what is the what's the most useful thing you've learned in those classes early on?
Billy Merritt, he said this thing that always stuck with me, and it didn't pertain to stage as much as it did just the creative mind, because I feel like they were so much more concerned. I'm also talking out of my ass in terms of how it might be there now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it is there now. They could be, I'm sure they are. It was always funny. They produced funny things. So I'm not dogging them at all. I'm just dogging
Oh,
the people that hung out there from 2006 to 2009 if you weren't people that were there to do the work.
yeah. Well, I
Uh
don't think they're doing much of anything right now because I think they went bankrupt, right?
oh, did they?
Yeah, when the
See, dude,
pan.
I'm out of the loop when it comes to that thing, that
Oh,
kind of thing.
yeah. Both the New York theaters have closed. I don't know about the one in
What?
Los Angeles. If that one's
Really?
gonna hang on or not. Yeah, like the pandemic.
Was it COVID related or did it happen before COVID?
Uh, Chunks of it are COVID related, and then there's some. There was a lot of layoffs before COVID. A lot of talk about like systematic racism up at the top, all the kind of stuff that we're talking about with comedy. So, but yeah, there's no UCB presence in New York now.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I okay. So after I kind of left that behind, I've kept up with not many folks from that era. Aaron Camino Smith, me and him were doing improv at the same time. Me and him stayed close, but that's only because he actually got me into stand up.
Uh huh.
We were in a group together called Sky Lounge with Andy Rocco
Oh yeah,
and
I know Andy. But what was it like when you were?
Mike Drucker.
Oh yeah, I know Mike also. But what was it like when you were taking
Smart
classes there
guy.
back in the day?
It was phenomenal. You had people that like really just wanted to do it, uh, and it brought all. When smart people are there, you know that they're doing something right because you had people not just in the comedy world that were taking classes because they understood that it was unlocking a asset, a tool that they would be able to use for other things later. Like
Yeah.
yeah, there's like a business guy. There was like a TV exec that was in my one of my first classes, and he was amazing. He was very good. He was very quick on his feet, but he wasn't doing it to become something. He was just doing it to learn and to tighten a skill set that he might not
Mm-hmm.
be good at now, but could use for other things. Um, there was an actor who was just phenomenal. Paul De Paul Dakova, Paul Dakorova. It was something there was a
Mm-hmm.
da in there,
Gotcha.
and he was insane to work with. And there were still crazies.
Mm-hmm.
There was this one dude that they had to eventually ask to stop coming back to class because every scene you would get in with him, it'd be like, your suggestion is ice cream. And inevitably there'd be that one person like, hey, this ice cream's really good, right? And then this
Uh
one particular person would always, yeah, you know what else is good? My sister's tight, but no, 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 no. Like he would always take it to like the weirdest,
huh.
most
Depraved sexual kind of
literally
place. Yeah.
incestual. Everything he did, there was always something where like some member of his family and something that nobody would ever want to hear about ever,
Right.
ever, ever. But
Uh
then
huh.
again, he might have just been ahead of his time because this is before Pornhub, and apparently half of Pornhub is just people talking about their things they want to do with their significant family members. So he
Maybe.
might be a billionaire at this point. I don't
Yeah.
know. I haven't
That
kept up
might
with
be
any of these
him.
folks.
That might have
Yeah.
been him. He was like, guys, I
Well,
got
what
an
he loved,
untapped market.
well, one of the last classes he got thrown out of, he's like, "You guys you're gonna regret this." Maybe we should. Maybe he unlocked the algorithm into his
Oh, that's
into
fucking.
his
It's
recesses.
like you're gonna regret this. You're gonna him. You're gonna. I'm gonna be something. Which if that's true, look at the way the world has worked out.
Yeah, right.
Um,
Every night he goes to sleep like Game of Thrones, and he's just like got a list of all of us from the improv class that he's gonna show
uh,
one day what's what,
yeah.
and
So,
then he came up with the porn algorithm.
and so the classes at UCB, was that like long form? Was that the Herald, or was it more like sketch based, like your yes improv games, yes and kind of stuff? What was
It was
the
it was
teaching like?
broken into like three different parts.
Mm-hmm.
You would warm up, and warming up is another one of those things that to this day, like I've trained other people on how to warm up properly if they're going to be in that kind of setting,
Yeah.
just because your brain needs to be told it's okay to be goofy sometimes. And a lot of those games were things that were literally just that. They were teaching you uh, there was one that I used to love. It was like the Beastie Boys game, and everybody would just stand in a circle, and somebody would. There was like a little rhythm that they would start up, and somebody would give one line of rhyme, and then it was up to the next person to
Uh
do the
huh.
next line of rhyme, and just you had no clue what it was going to be, and it wasn't always good, but it did. It was fun, and it was a thing where like you use that part of your brain that needs to be able to think off the top of your think on your feet.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things I still use in stand up to this day, because if you're out there and things go sideways and all of a sudden I remember, where was I? It was somewhere in the village. I was doing this indie show, and I've got my set and I know what I'm going to do, and
Yeah.
somebody I talked to the crowd. I can't remember why I talked to the crowd, but it comes to, because you know how it goes. Sometimes it just gives you things. You'll be up there and
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
will say something, and you talk to them to shut them up, but then it leads to something else, and you get like a little nugget out of it.
Uh huh.
Well, the nugget that I got on this particular night was the lady who was sitting next to the guy who was being an asshole, or however I got to her. She was a proctologist, and so the set was gone at that point, just because she offered up this little tidbit. And as soon as I find, I love learning what people do. I think it's so interesting to find, because it's hard with what we do to ever see anything outside of what we do, because
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of a reclusive little tight knit community of people that live in the dark
Yeah.
and go from place to place so that we can continue living in the dark
Sure.
and tell people to listen to us. Uh, so if you've got an interesting job, I always really like to hear about it. And as soon as she said proctologist, I was like, all right. And I at that point I already had like a list of questions that I asked people if
Uh
you
huh.
had an interesting job. And I was like, okay, so what's the weirdest thing you've ever seen as a proctologist in New York City? And she doesn't hesitate for a moment. She goes, softball. I'm like, what? And at this point, I know my set's gone because it's New York.
Uh
I've
huh.
only probably got 8 minutes to begin with.
Sure.
We're at
Yeah.
minute three, and all of a sudden, proctologist saying that she's pulled a softball out of somebody's ass comes up. Boom. We've got what we're talking about from the rest of the, from here on out.
Exactly.
And and I think improv came in. That's where they've given you something. It's the comics instinct to shit on them and hammer them to the point where stop talking, go away.
Right.
Or if you get something, because she wasn't being bad. She was just with somebody that was being bad.
Uh
I
huh.
think that's actually how I started talking to her, because it was like, I'm so sorry, ma'am. Is this how he is at home too? Like,
Uh
is that?
huh.
And she was like,
Yeah.
no, blah blah blah. Then her and I started talking. Turns out she sticks her hands up people's asses for a living. Boom, we're off to the races. And that's one of those things that Big J does that better than anybody you've ever seen in your life.
Oh
He'll go
yeah.
out there and farm the crowd and get people. I've seen him tell people things that should get you punched in the face. Like that's a thing. You just said that to that person. He should punch you. But
Yeah.
he does it in such a way that the guy's like, yeah, you're right. You should like skull fuck me or whatever the fuck he says to
Uh
him,
huh.
And we didn't talk about profanity. I've said multiple things at this point.
Oh,
I
dude,
hope
it's you can
folks
curse.
skull fucking is fine.
It's
Okay.
totally cool. This
Um,
is rated explicit.
hooray.
Just so no
But
problem, man.
that's where I think improv really can play a role in stand up, is just how you think on your feet when you get to instances where you need to think on your feet.
Totally.
And to go full circle with that ramble, Billy Merritt told us in one of the classes, had nothing to do with stage presence, but he just said, in terms of the creative brain, do something that you like to do once a day. If you're a writer, write something once a day. If you're a comic, write a joke once a day. If you don't have a joke to write, but you love comic books, read a comic book once a day. Just do
Hmm.
something one time a day to get those juices going.
Yeah.
Because once they stop flowing, it's a lot harder to get them started back up than it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
just to flex the muscle. And that's always stuck with me. And then it was Harold, and it was long form, and it was all of that, and it was fun. It taught you to think on your feet. I learned though that that wasn't going to be my bag, just because it was reliant on other people.
Hmm.
And there's something about mid 20s to late 20s where all of a sudden everybody that had nothing to do but do it 7 days a week, oh, Andrew's got a girlfriend, and oh, Mike's moving to LA, and Aaron's doing stand up all the time, and Bevan is Bevan, and you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, we all
I
just
do. Yeah.
started going our own way. And that's when Aaron was like, hey man, try stand up real quick. And I tried it, and I absolutely loved it. And from that point, the sheer overcoming of the obstacle that is a New York audience, because you're right, they're ready for you to fall on your face.
Hmm.
It's weird. You go to Georgia, and I've been down south too long. I think I just put 4 syllables in the word Georgia. Um, you go there, and they're like, "Oh, he's in my town. Tell me anything and I'll laugh," which is also can be bad, because you can very easily turn into
You get an inflated.
hack.
Yeah.
Well, you can just, it's easier. So if it's easier, you can slide things by that wouldn't make it in our my previous setting, your current setting. So the crowds outside of the city really want you to be good, because this is their Saturday. This
Uh
is their
huh.
Friday. They don't want, there's not a pizza place that makes pizza in a unique way around the corner. There's bricks. You,
And
you know what I
yeah,
mean?
exactly.
Like,
There
you
isn't a
can't,
movie theater that gets every single movie. You're going to get like the three most popular movies, and then you got to wait next month until for the next three most popular movies. Yeah,
exactly.
which comes back into again that I was talking about this last night with a very funny guy named Jay Zek. Like that's you want people to have a good time, because again that's their night. And then I think especially if you get into when you start if you when you get to that level with someone buys a ticket with your name on it, you kind of want to you kind of want to be able to
Back that up.
provide some value for that, most certainly. And there was something else you said that I think really resonated with me as well. Kind of about it was about improv, like the being able to be prepared for the unexpected. Because dear listener who maybe not might not know a ton about stand up comedy, the stand up comedy that you see on your Netflix special is not the stand up comedy you're often going to see if you go and pay 2 drinks to see a show in a comedy club. It's going to be a lot more. It's going to be a lot looser, because that's the kind of tone of that environment. So having
Totally. That Netflix special is the polished diamond of a year of work, 2 years of work, everything falling exactly where it should, because I've made it. I've learned where it should go. It goes back to the puzzle pieces we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation. You're
yeah.
you're watching the final product on Netflix or HBO or Comedy Central. Those are refined sets at that point.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think and comics, I think, always like I think get into like watching someone go through that process, like the little word tweaks. Like I've been watching Jerry Seinfeld do that Pop Tarts joke on like late night and talk about it in on video before it ended up on 23 Hours to Kill for so long, and I just kind of like watch him like, oh, he'll move this line from the beginning of the bit to like towards the end of the bit. He'll change like this word around, and it makes it does make it funnier.
It's weird. Placement is a big part of it. I mean, I'm sure you know you've been in sets before where like maybe you messed up, maybe you got out of rhythm with yourself, and the thing that was supposed to go here ends up going there, and it works better. Like there's something about the way it landed, timing wise, where that joke should have always been after that first joke, but you wanted it to be
Yeah.
before, so you put it there. Or you say something wrong, like you space right before you hit it, and it says like you say what you think is close to right, and then boom, that new thing worked better than the original thing. So
Yeah.
it's I think the thing about that guy is it's all meticulous. Like he has put it there for a reason. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
not a mistake on his part. That is a surgical move to put this here and that there.
Oh, totally. I always have compared watching Jerry Seinfeld do stand up to like to classical music. Like you're watching someone
Mm.
who is like just sat and like put sat at like a music sheet and just like meticulously moved notes around compared to like I'm drawing a blank on what a good example would be, but I would say I would think there are a lot of comics who I watch or act in. It's a little bit more like rock and roll, like a little more free form,
Mm-hmm.
or more jazz, like ska-pa-pa-da, kind of
Right.
thing, which goes back to improv as well. So and
But
how
that
long?
also sounds more fun, doesn't it? Like that was as soon as we were talking about Seinfeld, you're very classical music is a very accurate comparison, but that just seems not fun to me. Like
Not to
like
me,
the
no.
the beauty of the crowd isn't the conquering. Oh, I can't hear that. My grandma just texted and it made a noise. Did you hear that bing?
I did not. It must have been only
Oh, then
on.
I shouldn't have said anything, but she did, and she's a wonderful woman, and
Oh,
she's apparently making dinner next Sunday, so it's gonna be
that's
fun.
gonna be great. Normalcy is great as well, kids. That's
You
something.
need some. I think we've got too much normalcy right now. I need less. I've been on the road for so many weeks, and then freaking COVID hits, and all of a sudden I've got to learn. Oh, frack! I got to learn my neighbor's name. What was it?
Right. Yeah, I kind of wanted to. How long were you in New York City as a comedian?
uh, as a comedian, I think I started in 2008 and
Mm-hmm.
I left in 2015 stand
Okay.
up.
So
I,
about
I and I
seven
only
years.
I only claim 2008 because that was when me and Charles McBee and Troy Allen and a
Oh yeah,
handful
Troy.
of those guys. That's when we Miguel Dalmau. That's when we found the Gotham open mic. And in terms of like
Yeah.
a regular mic, that was the first place where like, okay, now I'm doing it regularly. I'm doing it
Mm-hmm.
every. It wasn't a I did it in January and I did it again in September and I told all my friends I'm a comic. No,
Sure,
it
sure.
was you're doing it. And even then, I don't think I told people I was a comedian until I got paid to do comedy. Because
Uh
there's
huh.
a big street cred thing there where you don't want to be that guy who's telling people, "Yeah, I did 19 shows last night," but 19 of those shows were like a hostel or
Or a
know,
bunch of paid
like,
open mics.
oh dear God, those were
Yeah.
always the worst. Some of the best advice I ever got was, "Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do bringers. Don't do paid open mics." And luckily I was new enough when somebody told me that I think I'd only done one,
Uh huh.
and I was like, "Why am I paying 450 for 4 minutes of stage time?" And somebody was like, "I think Aaron, I think Caminos." He was like, "You don't. That's why,
Uh huh.
and you don't have to. So don't."
Yeah. No, you don't.
And he actually hooked me up with the info on, because it's also back then it was like a little secretive, like not super secretive, but you knew the more people you told about that wonderful open mic, that the more people were going to be there next Thursday. And we
Right.
had a pretty solid little group of dudes that were all working things out. Ochi Motel, that was another fun one. Back when, what was the name of that club? It didn't last.
Comics.
Yeah.
Yep.
It ended. Like I never made it to the main stage there. But man, Ochi's Motel was fun as shit
Yeah.
back in
I
the
had some good
let's
times in
figure out what
Ochis.
sticks when you throw something at the wall era.
Oh yeah, I had so much fun there. It's funny you bring up comics because my third day in New York City, I went like just to go see a show at comics, and it was like it was like a crazy lineup. It was Eugene Merman and Andy Kindler co-headlining, and then Dan St. Germain was actually the MC, and then Jim Gaffigan dropped in and did a set, and I was like, and I remember like seeing Joe DeVito on the street, and I like recognized him from Last Comic Standing. I was like, "Excuse me, are you Joe DeVito?" Like I was just so new to the city. I'm sorry, Joe. I'm sorry, Joe. Um, that sounds disrespectful, but like I was just like, and it was a
No,
super fun show.
I laughed because I know how nice Joe is,
He's
and
so
he had
nice.
to have. There was probably like a sarcasm filter. He was trying to figure out which direction that was coming from. Like, is he genuinely wondering, or is he being a dick right now?
Right. Um,
Yes, asshole. I was. I know. I know.
but yeah, like
Jesus. So
that
for
was a
that,
great
at three
place.
days in, that was the show you saw.
Yeah, that was the show I saw 3 days in. Yeah, at
So you
comics.
had to have just thought that the stories are true. This is the promised land.
Pretty much. That's pretty much where I was, and then like I remember going to see a show that Eugene Merman hosted like later that summer, and like getting called on stage to like do a bit with him, and he
Oh,
gave me a GI Joe lunchbox with his parts of his lamp from his hotel at Comic
oh.
Con that he had stolen. it,
What was the name of those shows? It was him and it was Eugene Merman and
it wasn't
Bobby
invite.
Tisdale.
Yeah, it wasn't invite them up. It was the one after that, but
The
I
one before, the one after the okay. Invite them up must be the one I'm thinking of then, because
yes.
I know one of them is when it was like that little hole in the wall where like Stella and Aziz would go up all the time. Like I think they found Aziz, didn't they?
Yeah, that was invite them up. This was a show he did at the Bell House. I guess a few years after invite them up ended. But yeah, man, those were such like cool. Those were just like because I was just like so. I was just so like earnestly a fan of comedy, and I was just like so excited to be in New York because I'm like from a really like I'm from the woods in Maryland essentially, and I was just excited to like get into and live in a real city, like to live somewhere where there were where people were fans of sports teams that were in the same area that the team played compared to
Right, right.
like where I'm from Southern Maryland, so it was all like a lot of DC sport fans, but we were like an hour and a half from DC.
Right. Atlanta Braves when you grew up in North Carolina. I completely feel you on that one.
Uh huh.
Chipper Jones, like dude, Chipper Jones doesn't know who.
Exactly.
Don't.
I just get a thrill whenever like because I'm a big soccer fan, so like I like the team New York City Football Club, so and to be able to be like in New York City and be a fan of that team, I'm just like I feel like I'm not in the woods anymore.
Totally. And I
Basically.
mean that's a wonderful way to experience it for the first time. I mean, that's exactly what you want it to be.
Yeah.
I remember invite us up the moment I had a similar moment. It wasn't my third day. Kristen Shaw was at Invite Them Up, and she comes onto stage backwards, and
Uh
her
huh.
entire set is her building up to a surprise party that she didn't know she was going to have, and the audience are the guests at the surprise party,
Uh
and you're
huh.
just sitting there, and it's not like when people, and by people I mean the comics that have 8 minutes and they want their surprise party bit to be 3 minutes of the 8 minutes. So
Uh-huh.
they rush everything and it comes across as very hokey because you can tell they just rushed it. It doesn't there's no reality to it. It's just,
Yeah.
hey, everybody imagine this. It's a surprise party. You're all the guest at the surprise party. I'm gonna act surprised. Go.
Uh-huh.
She sold it the entire time. And I just me and again my wife now, who has always been so much cooler around better comedians than I have been.
Yeah,
I
I
remember.
found I found that to be the case also. My fiance is just terminally she's born in Brooklyn, so she's just terminally unimpressed with everybody that every comedian she meets. So, um,
Well, Jesse summed it up pretty well. I had just made a fool of myself in front of Zach Galifianakis, and
uh-huh.
she sat and had a conversation with him for like half an hour. And then I like, how do you keep doing this? And she's like, you got to remember, you were all nerds in high school. That's all you have to remember.
Right.
Like, holy shit, she's not wrong. She's treating us the way and that's also why he engaged her, because she wasn't treating him like Zach Galifianakis, the dude on the piano. She is treating him like Zach Galifianakis, the tubby dude with a beard at the bar. And it's like, fuck.
Yeah, exactly. It's and that makes total sense because especially if you're like if you're famous from the comedians of comedy, so those are like a dedicated group of people, and then someone just is like, oh, you're a comedian. Oh, cool. What do you think about this other thing that isn't comedy related? It's got
Right.
that's got to be nice. And how did you?
Welcome change.
I imagine so. So you were in New York for 7 years, and I because and when
Well,
did?
I was doing stand up for 7 years. I think I was in New York most of the 2000s, and then left in 2015. I just didn't start stand up until 2008.
Okay, so you lived in New York for closer to 15 years, and what brought about you wanting to leave?
Children, kids.
Yeah.
It was my son was born in 2011, and then about the time we started looking for schools, they told us that he was going to be going to a school that was under a bridge next to a gas station, and it was just that thing where that voice in the back of your head says, You've had your fun. You've done a lot here. Let's go somewhere else. Let's
Right.
make it not about you for a minute."
Sure.
So we looked in the because my wife's family is from Connecticut. So first we looked around that area so that
Mm-hmm.
we could still commute into the city and not have to completely change everything.
Sure.
And I was looking down south. She was looking up north. And we said, let's just make it organic. Whatever happens first, that's where we're supposed to go. And sure enough, North Carolina came a calling, and we left in 2015 to live in Wilmington for a couple years. And let me tell you, Wilmington, probably my favorite comedy scene.
Yeah.
Like everybody just loved each other. Like, and you wouldn't think, I didn't even know there was going to be a comedy scene in Wilmington when I left. I was a little worried that I
Uh
just
huh.
completely everything I'd worked for, I was just going to give it all up, and I was going to go live a normal life at the beach, but it was going to be the beach. So the beach was going
Yeah.
to balance out what I was giving up. And then as soon as I get down there, I see no, it wasn't Sean Donnelly actually. Donnelly told me oh, there's a place. That's wonderful,
I
Donnelly.
love Sean. I had him
I,
on
I,
recently. He's
I
love
love
that
Sean
dude.
so much. I when I see him often, I do a wonderful Sean, but it just I've not seen him in way too long. But he did. He told me there's this wonderful place in Wilmington, um, and a quick aside, my wife, Jesse, she
I
used to
do.
produce the shows with me,
Mm-hmm.
and all comics have things that we don't know about ourselves. Like there's just little comfortable things that we do on stage that we're not aware of. And Sean was doing one of my shows one time, and this would have been a long time ago. So Sean, don't hate me for telling this, but it was just so wonderful to watch. Sean had just gotten off stage and he fucking killed. Like Sean's been a beast since
Yeah.
forever.
I've never not seen that guy not be outrageously hilariously funny.
well, he's the trifecta.
Yeah.
He's a good writer. He's likable as shit on
Mm-hmm.
stage, and he's got the energy to make all of it come together. So like it's just a total package. He's the Lex Luger, whichever one's the wrestler that had the good body. That's Sean Donnelly.
Lex Luger.
Yes, the narcissist Lex Luger. The all yeah, Four Horsemen Lex Luger. So Donnelly gets off stage. He's just completely destroyed. And my wife comes up to him. She's like, "Oh my God, you did so well. That was awesome. I love the way you rub your belly while you're on stage." And Sean's entire face, he just drops, and he's like, "I I rub my belly while I'm on stage," and my wife's like, "Oh, it's so funny. Oh my goodness, it's so. Oh, I love it when you do that." And I've been doing it long enough now that I'm like, "Oh no, 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 don't do that, don't do that." She's like, she's doubling in. She's like, it's like you have it timed out, and you rub it, and I'm not sure if you're nervous or if you know you're doing. She's just digging a hole for herself. And Sean, the wonderful set that he just had. He was on Sky, like he was on cloud nine, and you can just see the regular everything that comes to a comic's mind, like after the high wears off.
Yeah.
You just see him come right back down to earth. He's like, "Yeah, thanks, yeah. Hey, thanks for having me, Jesse. Thanks for having me." So I don't know what we were talking about, but I love Sean Donnelly so much. He's always
love
been
Sean
such a
also.
good dude to me.
Oh yeah, well he was telling you about something in North Carolina. You were afraid there was no comedy scene in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Yeah.
And Sean told you
Sean,
there was.
not only does he tell me where to go, he puts me in touch with the dude that has some stroke there.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, he puts me in touch with Lou Morgante, one of the he's one of the best people ever. Like he's one of those nice guys that is legitimately nice. Like it's not he's nice and then you walk away and he's a dick. He's just nice.
Yeah.
His wife's nice. He's nice. Just great people. And he kind of hipped me up to what was going on in the scene, and sure enough, I went and they had an open mic on Thursday nights, and not an open mic like we knew. Like I thought, okay, it's an open mic. No, I'm talking like 100 paying customers at an open mic.
Yep.
Like
Mm-hmm.
out of this world frickin'. And then you go and you do some of the New York material in front of a crowd that is not expecting that at all. And I mean, it was just amazing.
Exactly. You'll blow the roof off the place. Oh, that's great, man. That's so great that he did that, because I feel like you can go and continue your comedy career in a different way in different parts of this country. I've also seen it starting to build a little bit internationally also. And you were saying that you have been doing the road a lot before the pandemic hit. Is that because I kind of want to get into what's going on with you now? Had you been doing like the like the southeast? Yeah.
Like my kids are still small. I turned down more than I probably should, just because I don't want to go further away than like 8 to 10 hours. It's changing now that my son's 9, my daughter's 5. Like they're babies, and if something happens, I can't get home quickly. That's not really true anymore. So I've been branching out. Somebody reached out to me to do Arizona recently. Not now, but as soon as everything clears up a little bit, I'm probably going to start expanding out of the comfort zone a little bit.
That's cool.
But it's been wonderful, just because I've always thought of New York as almost finishing school for comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Like you think you know what you're doing, and then you're in front of a Broadway crowd at 1:00 in the morning, or a Times Square crowd. I mean, at 1:00 in the morning, and there's nothing that will tell you if a joke is funny or not quicker than if you can make the dude half passed out on methadone at 1:00 that just wandered in because he got a ticket for free.
Yeah.
If you can make that guy laugh, that's a good joke. But there's a parallel to that in other parts of the country as well. If you can make the redneck that doesn't want to be there, who only came because his girlfriend dragged him and he's waiting to buy 2 drinks so he can get her home and claim his reward for those 2 drinks, then if you've got his attention when he sat there with his arms crossed the entire time, that's a good joke too. Like it's different. There's really different edges to both sides of the coin, I guess.
I agree with that completely, and I've always felt that like being yeah like New York is like where you put your reps in, and then like the actual like real work of being comedians going out and being funny in like places
West
where
Virginia.
in West Virginia or in like Montana.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been to Montana or like beach towns, like places where you don't need comedy.
Right,
Like West
right.
Palm Beach. Like if you can go and crush in West Palm Beach, where like the beach is right there, and there's good restaurants, and it's nice to be outside. Well, probably not right now. Um, if you can
But
go
no,
be
you're
funny
absolutely
there,
right.
yeah.
You're always fighting distraction. I think maybe that might be why the New York crowds were so hard, because they literally had anything else that they could be doing and the best in the world at their disposal to go see, and they came to see a show that they didn't know you were going to be on, but you were still on. So yeah, I think distraction still is the ultimate enemy.
Abs-
Uh,
yeah,
and in
absolutely.
areas that aren't New York, it's sometimes, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Sometimes you'll get the crowd that you're in a one-off town where there's one thing to do that night, and
Hmm.
it's you, and they are
Yeah.
so appreciative. Like they don't to end. Like it's not like New York where they can't wait to get out of there because they were told there were going to be three comics, but there actually were 15, and all of them are going to do 10 minutes. Um, there's some crowds where you're just like, because you got to, you'll gauge them at like the 45-minute mark. All right, guys, you guys getting tired? And if they're like, no, keep going, you're like, all right, let's ride this fuck train till dawn. You just keep
Exactly.
it going. uh Versus New York, where you'd be like, who? Oh, okay, bye.
Yep, I've
Like,
definitely had that. I've definitely had that. Um, is there something that you want to create that you haven't yet? That you have planned for the future?
oh, totally. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make when they start doing comedy is that I'm gonna be a comedian. I remember Miguel, he got asked by an agent one time, like, where do you see yourself? And he told them, a comedian. And that was not the answer the agent wanted to hear,
Uh huh.
because comedian is one note.
Yeah.
It's clubs and colleges and
Corporates and
corporates,
yeah.
and all of those things. He wanted to hear, oh, I've got a book idea, I've got a movie I've written, I've got a TV show pitch, I've got all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's anything that you haven't created yet is something that you should think about creating.
Yeah.
Like I've got a lot of things that I've got in the works right now that are kind of paused because of this, but they don't have to be.
Uh
The
huh.
only thing that has to be paused right now is the live aspect of everything.
Mm-hmm.
The everything else you've got going, barring being a school teacher, which is what I am right now, which is, I was not ready for that. Will, let me tell you,
Yeah.
like all of our schools are virtual.
Uh huh. Oh my
Dear
God, I'm
dear
so
Lord,
sorry.
it's so. I mean, I luckily the kids aren't assholes, but it's still, they've got a virtual teacher that comes on and goes, "Hey, everybody, my daughter's in kindergarten, so it's like ABCs.
Uh
All
huh.
right, bye." And then I've got to go, all right, she said ABCs. A, lowercase a, B,
Yeah.
lowercase b. And you're just sitting there, and you're like, all right, I guess this is what I'm doing for the moment. Because it's hard. There is a lot of, okay, I got this idea. I'm going to write this. Oh, it's going to be so good. I'm going to write this. I'm going to get it done by the end of the week. Could you teach me multiplication? I can't say no.
Uh huh.
I can't say no, 9-year old. I'm not going to teach you multiplication. Go through life as a moron and let it be my fault. No. All
Exactly.
right. Everything times one is itself. What was that idea I had? Ah, fuck.
Well, you just got to get because I think about that a lot too, as far as like balancing. Because I am doing this podcast. I have a band, and I'm trying to not be a piece of shit husband in the future. So
Totally.
If anything, like
Which is such a about to get married thing to say, might I add.
yeah, it is. I feel like that's better than the alternative. But
Oh yeah, you don't want to be an asshole husband.
yeah, if there's, and maybe, and I don't know if this is helpful. I take lots of notes I take I make lots of notes of every idea I have, and I make it detailed enough that I'll remember it when I look at it later. And I do addendums so that I don't lose anything.
Right.
I have I have much. I may have limited time, but I will find time for it eventually. And from what it sounds like,
Well,
I
that's
feel.
another.
I'm sorry. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead. We're so polite.
Yeah, it's a good for full circle. It sounds like you have your priorities in the right place, but you are also still a comedian and a creative person, which is good. I'm glad that that is the case.
Oh, totally. And I mean, I do. I'm also going to sound pretentious as shit here. I do art and shit like that. So I had
Hmm.
my first gallery show last year. I've got a few things turning outside of the art, the stand-up world. So, but what you just said a minute ago, that's another Seinfeld thing. Seinfeld keeps a notebook next to the bed so that if he wakes up in the middle of the night with some idea,
Hmm.
he will write it. He'll have it and he'll write it down right then. And that's
Yeah.
just to your point, when you have something, chronicle it so that you don't lose it. Stephen King, a lot of his books, like some of the more fucked up books, he was having a nightmare,
Uh
kept a
huh.
pen next to the bed, woke up that 20 seconds where you can remember everything from the dream,
Yeah.
writes it down. I mean, that's where like Tommy Knocker, bad example, one of his best books, but in the article I read, Tommy Knockers was one of the ones where he explained, yeah, I had this idea and then wrote it down and or this dream and I woke up and wrote it down and then I flushed it out over the next little bit. So it's also time management is a huge thing
Yeah.
that kids you can schedule as much time for something as you want and then all of a sudden someone shits their pants or okay,
Right.
this is my hour, this is the hour, I've got this 30 minutes to work on this, I've got 30 minutes to work on that. Connor hit me in the back. All right,
You're just like,
uh
why?
hit him back, I've got this joke about hold on, let me look. Okay, just tell me how the fight goes, I guess. I don't know. we're 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 so we left New York and we were complete helicopters. I remember we would take our kid to Astoria Park and just be like, it was. We also were living in New York during the To Catch a Predator phase. I know you
Hmm.
remember that because
I
every
do.
comic in the world had a
To catch a Chris
tag
Hansen
where
joke. Yep.
and then Chris Hansen shows up. Those were two things that just annoyed the shit out of me. Chris Hansen and Law and Order. Everybody thought, and everybody still thinks to an extent, it's almost like an extension of the dolphin. The dun dun.
Uh
If
huh.
a person gets trapped in a bit about something and they've got a Law and Order joke in their back pocket, they will break out that dun dun noise like a
Uh huh.
lifesaver. And it's the least original thing in the world to me. I think if you're going to go on a Law and Order rant, I don't think that the joke is in Law and Order itself. I think it's in how in each episode they ruined the first two people's lives that they thought were the bad guy before they found out it was the neighbor. I think those are the
Right.
people that deserve apologies because they showed up at his office. They threw a pair of little girl panties on his desk. They made all of his coworkers think he was a pedophile. And then when they find out it was the next door neighbor, there's not like a round two where they show up and tell everybody, Greg's not a bad guy. We're so sorry. We caught this
Right.
dude down the street. Like fuck Law and Order. Fuck it so hard I hate it. I
That's
can't watch it. I get physically angry watching Law and Order. I hate that show.
please. If you're not doing that on stage, I have that recorded because you'll need to be doing that on stage. That's very funny, man.
Oh,
Um,
thank you very much. No, that's just I physically get angry. There's only a few things that I because also whenever somebody does a dun dun bit, they always act like that was me. Everybody, that was me. Don't Google comedians talking about Law and Order. Definitely stay away from John Mulaney. But that thing you just heard, that's something I did for you. It's like no, no, it's
mhm.
irritating.
One of my other
Do you have
favorite
any
Law
of
and Order.
those? Do
Any
you have
like
any of
dun
those
dun.
little quirks that just irritate you in terms of like when you see somebody do it on stage?
Um, for three thing, three things that really started to grate on me after a while. Uh, and I haven't seen nothing's really irritated me recently, but I got very over hearing jokes about Tinder. I got very over hearing jokes about smoking pot, and I didn't see too much of this, but apparently those all got replaced in 2020 with eating ass jokes. Like that's like the new hack
Oh
thing
my
that all
God,
the open
right?
mics, like everyone talks about eating ass now.
Dude, I didn't even think about eating ass. That is like the one that's become like the new say like if the low hanging fruit
Uh huh.
of someone's first year in comedy. Like I think when I was starting it was jerking off and everybody in their
Yeah.
first year had 19,000 jokes about jerking off.
Yep.
And now you go see somebody in year 1 and it's probably about eating ass. It is, which is a legitimate thing. That's crossed over from
Yeah.
stand up jokes to like real life.
Uh huh.
A buddy of mine got divorced, and we were still living in Wilmington at the time. And I won't say his name because he might listen to this.
Okay.
He'll know it's him. Uh, he calls me up, and he'd been divorced for just long enough to where he had started the dating sites and all of that stuff. And he made the mistake, and he was 38, 37, something like that. He made the mistake of going on a date with like a 23-year-old. And he calls me
Mm-hmm.
up,
Classic.
and he's kind of freaked out. I'm like, how's it going, man? Because I knew he'd gone on the date. He's like, dude, it's different. And I was like, okay, like good different. You went out with a 23-year-old. I mean, to some folks that might sound like you win, you know. And he
Mm-hmm.
goes, nope. Uh, uh, Expectations have changed. I'm like, again, you're being very vague here. I don't know what you mean by expectations. Did you split the check? Is that what's changed? Because when we were growing up, the guy paid, but in today's world, I would think it's probably better. Split the bill 50-50. He's like, she wanted me to eat her ass. And I was like, oh, not what I was expecting at all to come out of your partially gray mouth. Like, and he was like, I didn't know. And the thing about age and that subject,
Uh huh.
he gave the most adult response because I was like, you brought it up, so what did you do? He's like, we had been out to eat, we had walked on the beach. That's like 3 hours so you didn't do it. He's like, no, she'd been maybe if she had just taken a bath, but she had been on the beach. We had just eaten freaking spicy Thai. I went, no, 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 no. And apparently that was the point of contention on the entire date, was the fact that like you've got me naked. I only have one more thing that you have to do. One riddle you must answer before I unlock the mystery of Curly's gold, and that would be to take a sniff up Curly's coal mine before we cross over into Eternia. And again, and I
It's a
judged
very
him immediately.
practical answer. It's a practical answer.
Yes, it's a very practical answer. And I then told my son he couldn't go to his house anymore.
He's like, it's just he's got some stuff to figure out. He needs some space. Oh my!
Of all the things that I want to explain, Henry would have been like 7 at that time. Of all the things that I don't want to have to explain to a 7-year-old, why did I walk in on this kid's dad doing what looked like a trip and fall act into this lady's nether? Well, they got divorced, and when you get divorced, you have to start making changes in your life to make sure that you don't die alone and unhappy. So his was that he made that woman take a bath, and then he dived down on that chocolate cone, baby. Don't worry about it. Just go to sleep and close the door. I'll tell him you didn't see anything because he's already called to tell me that you might have.
That's fucking hilarious, dude.
Oh man,
Jesse,
and that's another thing. I'm never going to be able to talk about that on stage. Will, at what point am I going to be like, hey, everybody who's gone with me on this magical adventure, who wants to talk about eating ass now? Because I've got a story for you.
Well, if it just exists on this podcast, I'm glad that it was my podcast that this story exists. Jesse, this has been a wonderful. It's been great getting to catch up and chat with you again, man. Is there anything that we can plug before we get out here?
Hey, eventually I'll be back on the road. You can find me at jessejonesonline.com. There is some pretty exciting news coming soon, but I can't really say anything about it right now. You'll be hearing more from me soon on all things that are going to be good and well in the world. So, Will, it's so nice to see you again, buddy. I've not seen you, and I don't think because I hadn't seen you for a little bit before I left, just because the Laughing Devil uh, went away, and then we
Yeah.
sort of fell out of touch after that.
Yeah, I think so. I was going through a lot of stuff at the time, but I'm in a pretty good place now, and it was great to get to chat with you again. Hopefully, in the future, there's some road gigs where we share the stage again, man. I would want that. That would be cool.
Oh, most definitely, that would be phenomenal. And again, I hope to be back in New York sometime soon. It's just I've had a few people ask me, and I don't want to go unless I've got something to go for. You know what I mean? There's nothing
Absolutely.
worse than being the guy that comes back and you're like, "Hey, what's everybody doing? What are you doing in town? Seeing you. Came to see you.
Yeah.
Okay."
Yeah, you definitely don't want that. But if I have enough notice, if I have enough notice, I will always have time for you, Jesse, man. So thanks for chatting
Oh,
with me today.
of course, buddy. It's been good talking to you.
Awesome. Thanks, man. That's the kind of conversation that I've had with comedians in green rooms and in the back of the room through much of my comedy career. And Jesse is a great friend that I've always enjoyed chopping it up with, and I'm glad that he's in a good place. And I look forward to seeing what he does once shows are able to resume in a real way. And thanks for your time, Jesse. I sincerely appreciate it, and thank you to you for listening to the show. I appreciate you being here. If you enjoyed this, and think you know a friend who might be interested in this podcast as well, you can tell them we're available everywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. And if you want to get a free month of Stitcher Premium and support the show at the same time, you can go to stitcher.com/premium and sign up with the promo code AWESOME in all caps. Again, that is stitcher.com/premium, awesome, all caps, to get a free month of Stitcher Premium and support the show as well. And I also want to give a shout out to my supporter on Patreon at the awesome producer level, Mary Beth Mooney. Thank you so much for your support. I sincerely appreciate it. And if you guys are curious, you can go to patreon.com/awesomedisaster, see what I have got going over there for you. I'll have a lot of new things coming up in the near future. So thank you guys again for being here. Treat each other well, and I will see you next time between awesome and disaster. Stay safe and wear a mask.